I don't like to hear me. Back in Mark chapter 10, and we have a fairly lengthy passage to try to get through this morning. So before we get started, Ben, will you open us in a word of prayer? Mark chapter 10, verse 32. And they were in the way, going up to Jerusalem. Remember when we studied the Psalms of Ascent? Doug, the Bible always references when you're going to Jerusalem as going up to Jerusalem. And this would be a journey that the disciples had made dozens of times. So this was a very common path. This is something they were very well aware of, and they were in the way going up to Jerusalem. And Jesus went before them, and they were amazed. And as they followed, they were afraid. And he took again the 12 and began to tell them what things should happen to him. I love that phrase. It's as simple as could be. Brother Kevin, it just simply says this. Jesus took them on a walk, and he's telling them what's going to happen. Now, we're going to see this is in chapter 8, chapter 9, and chapter 10. He tells them the exact same thing 3 different times, and we're going to see they still don't get it. Okay? He tells them exactly what's going to happen. Verse 33, what did he say? Saying, behold, we go up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man shall be delivered unto the chief priest and unto the scribes, and they shall condemn him to death, and shall deliver him to the Gentiles. And they shall mock him. They're going to deliver him to the Gentiles. So he's going to be delivered ultimately to the Romans. The Romans are going to mock him. They'll scourge him. They'll spit upon him. And they'll kill him. And the 3rd day he shall rise again. Again, this is the 3rd time he said this exact phrase. Yet, they still don't get it. Verse 35. And James and John, the sons of Zebedee, come unto him. This is after this conversation. Brother Ivy, here's the conversation. We're going to Jerusalem where the Son of Man is going to be delivered. Now, we're going to look at that word delivered briefly, but we're going to look at that word delivered because it's a great word. The Son of Man shall be delivered, and he's going to be delivered by Judas into the hands of the Sanhedrin, and then they're going to deliver him to the Romans, and then the Romans are going to deliver him to the soldiers, and the soldiers are going to beat him, spit upon him, mock him, crucify him, and ultimately he is going to die. There's the conversation. Now they come up to him. You would think this is a pretty deep conversation. They come up to him with the modern view of prayer, perfect words. James and John, the sons of Zebedee, come unto him saying, Master, this whole phrase doesn't go together, by the way. Master, you're the master. We would that thou shouldest do for us whatsoever we shall desire. You're the master. We want you to give us whatever we ask for. Which, by the way, if we really stop and think, is often how we view prayer. It's us going to the master to get whatever we want. It's not seeking the revelation of what he wants. Verse 36, and he said unto them, what would ye that I should do for you? They said unto him, Here's the big, great, mighty picture, okay? This is what comes out of, I'm going to die. I'm going to take this cup for you. This is why we're going to Jerusalem. This is what comes out of it. They said unto him, grant unto us that we may sit, one on the right hand and the other on the left hand in thy glory. What comes out is, give us the best life. We're here. We're following you. Give me the right, give him the left, give me the left. I guess I'll take the left. Give him the right. But just give us that preeminent, blessed place. And again, if we stop and think of what we ask for in prayer, oftentimes it's going to be, Lord, make my life easier. But Jesus said unto them, ye know not what ye ask. Can ye drink the cup that I drink of, and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with? Now that's a rhetorical question that should be answered with no. I mean, that's an obvious rhetorical question that should get a, no, we can't. That's why you're the master. You just told us what you're doing, where you're going, why. No, we can't drink of that cup. But their answer, and they said unto him, we can. And Jesus said unto them, ye shall indeed drink of the cup that I drink of, and with the baptism that I am baptized with shall ye be baptized. But to sit on my right hand and to sit on my left hand is not mine to give, but it shall be given to them for whom it is prepared. And when the 10 heard it, so this is the two that sneak off. When the 10 heard it, they began to be much displeased with James and John. You know, Brother Kevin, you know why they were displeased? Because they all wanted that spot too. You beat me to the question. But Jesus called them to him, and he saith unto them, ye know that which are accounted to rule over the Gentiles. You know those who rule over the Gentiles. This is how they do it. They exercise lordship over them, and their great ones exercise authority upon them. But so shall it not be among you. This is not greatness. This is not leadership. This is not what empowers you. This is not what my kingdom looks like. This is what you're wanting, right hand and left hand. But you're still viewing it the same way. But it shall not be among you. But whosoever will be great among you shall be your minister. And whosoever of you will be the chiefest shall be servant of all. For even the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister, and to give his life a ransom for many. Big passage. A bunch of stuff in this passage. We're going to try to concentrate on two main thoughts. One comes from verse 43. We'll go through this pretty quickly, I think, and the other is from 45. 43, not so among you. But Ivy, Christians have no business living, looking, acting like the culture, especially when it comes to places. Now, that is an easy, I don't do this very well. You know, I've tried before. You have the list of automatic amen getters. You know, you have just like this list of things you can throw out and you're going to get response, comment. Going to Baptist church long enough, you know what those are. Different times, they're different things, but you can throw them out. I stink at that. Let me tell you, I just threw one out. We shouldn't look like the world. That's an automatic amen getter. You're going to get it. Usually, people are going to have their picture. That means we should not wear this clothes, or we should do this, or our hair should only be this length, or we don't wear T-shirts with pictures on them. We get the Moyer, you know the list. Oh, it's not Moyer anymore. Miss Pickles, you know the list. You could quote it better than me. We throw it out there, and that's what happens. No, these things, but notice what it's talking about right here. We shouldn't be like the world in how we view authority. We shouldn't be like the world in how we administer that authority over others. It's not the big bully. It's not the power over. It's not the under the thumb. Just when I throw that out and get the automatic amen giver, nobody's thinking about it that way. And that's the way he's talking about it. In fact, if we're not careful, you know what happens? I know that's true, but in this situation, it's what was needed. In this situation, what was needed was to be like the world. I've grown up in church. You want to know how many times I've heard that? I've been on the other side of that. I've stopped and asked people talking to me, so, wait a minute, let me just answer your question. So right now, the way you're acting is justified? You know what happens when you do that as a young person? The way they're acting gets ratcheted up. So I have my answer. Yes, it is. Yes, in your mind, it's justified right now. Brother Kevin, I'm not trying to pick a fight. I'm just trying to show how important this is. Because it's really easy to go through this and say, those disciples, how did they do this, those knuckleheads? Well, you know who's like the disciples. Second thing we're going to try to get to is in verse 45, and that's based off this one word, ransom. Jesus was to be delivered by God to be our ransom. And we're going to spend a little time hopefully looking at that word. The idea. One of the great deceptions Satan uses to weaken the church in every generation is the idea that the more the church looks like, sees things like, responds like the culture. Okay, now we usually say the more that we respond like the world, that fits in, Baptist vernacular. But if we're talking to young people today, it's the more we act like the culture. Because they're like, the world, what's the world? Okay, the more we act like the culture, the greater our opportunity would be to influence that culture, to be heard by that culture. That makes sense if we want to pitch it out there, but it's not biblically true. In fact, that's what he's saying right now. The Bible teaches again and again things like we're not of the world, we're aliens, we're just passing through. The ultimate picture is we're supposed to be counter-cultural. What he just did, what we just looked at, is the idea of when it comes to leadership, when it comes to how we pick leadership, how we lead when we're in leadership, we're supposed to be counter-cultural. We do it differently. We do it by serving. Here, I was working on this early in the week, and then I heard this on the radio. I heard somebody reference an article on the radio. And Ben, if I hear an article on the radio that I like, there's this wonderful thing called Google. I'll find it. Okay? So I looked it up. I found it. I printed it out. It's based upon something that was written in the New York Times, which was ultimately goes back and is quoting some things that were done by Ruth Graham, where she quoted a survey for the Center on American Life, which shows that here, not to give you numbers, don't bore you. For the first time since people have been paying attention, more women are leaving the church, Gen Zers, than men. But that's never happened before. More women, Gen Zers, leaving the church than men. So the article goes into, well, I read this, I heard this, and I wanted to ask why. So they kept looking, checking some other surveys. Here was the results that they wrote. In church, Gen Z men are still being called to sacrifice. This is in a culture that has taught those men that they need to live for themselves. Countercultural. At church, Gen Z men are still being called to live disciplined life in a culture that has taught them that their whole purpose is to indulge self. Countercultural. At church, Gen Z men are still being called to community in a culture that taught them that they need to be isolated and do things on their own and depend on no one but self. At church, Gen Z men are still being called to a purpose. There is a purpose for your life. They live in a culture that taught them that your life is meaningless, so just have as much fun as you can for as long as you can. At church, Gen Z men are being called to love their wives in a culture that taught them that marriage is useless. At church, Gen Z men are still being called to purity in a culture that promised them fulfillment from sexual freedom. At church, Gen Z men are still being called to work hard in a culture that taught them to quietly quit and be provided for. I mean, if you really want to stop and look at it, that's almost the new American way. Interview some Gen Z people, you'll find out. At church, Gen Z men are still being called sons in a culture that taught them that as men, they're toxic. Counter-cultural. Here's the conclusion. I cut it out and put it so I didn't forget it. In the church, Gen Z men are rejecting the false masculinities offered by the culture and finding an alternative. That's why the numbers aren't dropping down, because the church is countercultural in how it views men, and men are seeing the difference, and it's attractive. By the way, we're talking about leadership. You know what the most necessary thing to be a leader is? Somebody willing to follow you. That's tough, isn't it? Brilliant. No one is going to be willing to follow you unless they believe what you are doing is in their best interest, not your own. If it's in your own, you take care of you, I take care of me, there's no follow here. There's pure rebellion. Maybe I sneak and do it around you, but I'm going to take care of me if you're not. Counter-cultural. But anyway, in his death, Jesus subverts the ego, dominance, self-centeredness of toxic masculinity in a divine display of humility, sacrifice, and love. But the cross does not just paint a picture of a soft person. The cross also challenges the soft, aimless version of manhood that avoids responsibility and purpose. Jesus' example shows us that real manhood embraces responsibility, cultivates strength, commits to a mission, and it does not serve oneself, but it is set to serve others, others who are going to mistreat you. It's beautiful. Now, this passage is talking about countercultural. It's not talking about countercultural masculinity. It is talking about countercultural leadership. To be a leader, we have to have people willing to follow, and that means they need to think that we want the best for them. That's not because we're pulling the wool over their eyes. That's because we honestly want the best for them. That means when we respond to them, we're trying to help them in the best way we can to accomplish what they need, not what they want, because often there's a difference. I mean, you're a father, you're a mother, you have a child. Sometimes what he wants and what is best for him is greatly different. Getting him to understand that this is what is best for him is your job, because then he'll continue to want to follow you. Bow up with power over, provoke not thy child to wrath, fathers, because they will rebel. Ben, you say, but Jeremy, that's all wonderful, but I've been here for 3 weeks in a row, and I think I've heard that before, a lot. I'm so glad you've been paying attention. The reason you have heard it a lot is because so have the disciples. It is so easy to justify power over me, pride. I'm better than this person. I know what's best. I mean, we see it right here in the two disciples, right hand, left hand. There's just this desire to want the best seat. I was thinking about that. I actually thought about your wedding. I think your wedding was the last one I went to. And I remember walking around the wedding. I don't remember who, because I don't really pay attention, but I remember walking around the wedding and people seeing, why am I sitting in this seat way back here? And it instantly made me remember, I never realized how much sitting in whatever seat matters to people. Matt, that's the dumbest thing in the world. I don't think like that. But I went to 2 weddings. I watched the planning session for 2 weddings where they talked for hours about, no, we can't put this person here and this person has to be here. And why? Do you know why? Because we care about where we sit. We care about how we're viewed. Sometimes we forget to care about how we're viewed here, and we just care about how we're viewed here. And the last thing I want to be viewed as is a servant. View me as the boss. It's not supposed to be so among you. Anyway, 3 times. We're in chapter 10. If you turn back a couple pages, chapter 8. Since this passage in chapter 8, we've now heard this same exact thing in different ways 3 different times. Mark chapter 8, verse 21, and he saith unto them, but whom say ye that I am? This is the pivotal point in the book of Mark. Up to this point, Doug, up to this point, everything is about, let me tell you what he does. He heals the sick. He feeds. He's walked on the water. This is who he is equates to what he does. And there really hasn't been much teaching. So you're like fly through the first 7 chapters. Wham! Then you get here and everything slows down. Because now it is about who he is and his teaching and what he's come to do. And it starts right here. Whom say ye that I am? And Peter gets it right. Somehow, Peter gets this right. We've gone through, and this is like the first thing I remember him getting right. Everything seems to be, oops. Thou art the Christ. And he began to teach them, verse 31, Son of man, go back to Daniel chapter 6, Son of man, this is Christ. This is the Lord incarnate. He's coming back to make what's wrong and broken and fix it. He's going to restore the creation. And that's who they just said he was. The Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected of the elders and of the chief priests and scribes and be killed and after 3 days rise again. The first time he tells them, let me tell you what's going to happen. The Christ, Peter, you just got this right. I'm going to be killed. And after 3 days, I'm going to rise again. And they don't want that picture. Peter says, no, say it ain't so. He rejects him. And then he goes in to give them this picture of what the kingdom looks like. Verse 34, whosoever will come after me, let him deny himself, which is why the rich young ruler had to deny what he was trusting in. Let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whosoever will save his life shall lose it. But whosoever shall lose his life for my sake and the gospel, the same shall save it. He talks about gain through loss. He talks about Christ-bearing. He talks about self-denial. He deals with self-sacrifice, with selfishness. Okay, he starts to roll out this picture. You want to know what greatness is? You want to know what's valued in the kingdom? It's not what's valued in the world. Then he goes to chapter 9. Chapter 9, verse 31. For he taught his disciples and said unto them, the Son of Man is delivered. That great word again. He is delivered. This is one of those pictures that we just struggle with. Preacher, at times, you know what I want to say? At times, I want to say very much, I put him on that cross. There are times I know that I need to own that. There are times that I want to say, Judas betrayed him. Okay, we want to concentrate on what was done at this level. But there are other times that all we want to do is concentrate on, he put himself there. He willingly died. His blood wasn't shed. He offered it up. You know what? Both were true. The key word is he was delivered. He was delivered by Judas. He was delivered by the Sanhedrin. He was delivered to Pilate. He was delivered by the soldiers. He was delivered by all of those people. Somehow, God in his miraculous Godhead is able to give man choice and accomplish his will because he delivered him up to save us all. And that is a key word. By the way, if you want to talk about places where you have to really be careful, if you use a different version, lots of times those words are not delivered. They are betrayed or given over. But that word is delivered because God delivered him up for us all. Romans chapter 8. So we get this picture. Verse 9, in chapter 9, he rolls out the same exact thing and it ends the same day. And he shall rise again on the third day. Now, Doug, you know what happens from this. They go on a walk. On the walk, they're back there talking. They get to the house. What were you guys talking about? And they were embarrassed. Because what were they talking about? Who's going to be the greatest? Again, they're missing it. They're missing it. They're looking at what is the greatest in the world, but it should not be that way. That's not how we live. That's not how we evaluate. That's not how things are valued in kingdom. That brings us to chapter 10, where we get the same exact picture. And they were in the way, verse 32, going up Jerusalem, and Jesus went before them, and they were amazed as they followed, and they were afraid. That's because they're hearing this for the third time, and he took again the 12 and began to tell them what things should happen. I'm telling you again what's going to happen. Behold, we go up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man shall be delivered. Let me tell you what's going to happen. This is what is going to happen. I'm going to be delivered. I'm going to Jerusalem to die, but 3 days later I will rise again. And we see what happens after it, verse 35. But James and John said, we want you to do whatever we ask, which is short for I have a prayer. I want you to answer my prayer, and my prayer is sit on the right and sit on the left. They're just missing it. Ask. I ask it. When did they get it? Because I said this last week, and I believe this very much. We need to live each day in light of the gospel. If we don't live each day in light of the gospel, we're James and John. We're the 12. Who's the greatest? What humbles us is the picture of the gospel. So when did they get it? I don't know when they got it, but I love this picture. I love this picture. It comes from Acts chapter 2. Do you have that verse? If not, do I need to turn there? Now remember, Jesus rose again. And you know after he rose again what he had to do? He had to teach them some more. Yeah. Because now they were opening to listen. Now those things meant some. And he taught them. And then they waited for the Holy Ghost. And then Peter began to preach. And look at what he says. I'm not going to be able to read this without crying. Yeah. Ye men of Israel, hear these words. Jesus of Nazareth, a man approved of God among you by miracles and wonders and signs which God did by him in the midst of you, as ye yourselves know. Ben this way says, I'm going to tell you what you already know. This is who he was. This is what he came. You know he did miracles. You know he healed. You know what was done. This is not in doubt. It was not in question. You're not going to argue any of this. Let me throw it out. Here's the groundwork. Jesus of Nazareth, who God approved, and you know what he did during his ministry. Nobody questions or argues back, by the way, which is huge. His entire sermon is based off of this opening statement. We want to say, well, I'm not sure. Well, they were sure, and they lived through it. And it caused great change in the city right after this. Anyway, give me the next verse. Oh, here you go. Him being, what? Delivered by the determinate counsel and foreknowledge of God, ye have taken, and by wicked hands have crucified and slain. I don't know when they got it. But I know by Acts chapter 2, Peter got it. God delivered him, you delivered him. But he went. And on the third day, just like he said, he rose again. That is the gospel. He begins with this picture. This is what he's rolling out. If we stay in Mark chapter 10, it's after rolling this picture out that we get, okay, I want to be the greatest. I want the right hand, I want the left hand. Jesus' response, let me ask you a question. Do you really think you can take my cup? The question that should be no. The silly, quick, irresponsible answer, sure we can. Yeah, we can. So here I'm like, well, there's 2, but there's at least 10 good guys left, right? No, they're over there waiting to lose it because why did you beat me to the question? They're furious with James and John because you got them first. We've been talking about this for weeks, guys. Don't be sneaky. At least always before, it's Peter, James, and John. Now Peter's even kicked out of the group. So the response, Jesus begins to teach them, and this is our second thought. Verse 41, and when the 10 heard it, they began to be much displeased with James and John. But Jesus called them to him, and he saith unto them, Ye know that they which are accounted to rule over the Gentiles exercise lordship over them, and that their great ones exercise authority upon them. But so shall it not be among you. But whosoever will be great among you shall be your ministers, and whosoever of you will be the chiefest shall be servant of all. Verse 45, for even the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister, and to give his life a ransom for many. What a word. To give his life a ransom. Now this word is going to tell us 2 things for sure. But first we've got to, what is the word? Today when we think of this word, actually when a Jew heard this word, they're going back to Leviticus, they're going back to Exodus, they're going back to Numbers. Okay, there was an opportunity. If you had a cow and it gored your neighbor and neighbor died, there's an opportunity for a ransom to be made or life to be paid. Okay, this was part of the law. This word meant something to them. But to us, ransom is kidnapping. But that's okay because it still fits. Because you know what happens if somebody kidnaps my child? Good luck to him because they're all pretty big boys now. You got to feed them. And you better hope they don't have to go to the bathroom. If somebody kidnaps my child, he is now in captivity. He's not free. And he is in captivity until I pay some exorbitant sum to get him freed, which means they're in trouble. And we were in trouble too. Except the creator of all heaven said, I will pay it. Amen. So when he talks about ransom, that's the exact picture he's looking at. I will pay, I will free from captivity. Whatever the terrible price is, I will pay it. Brother Ivy, when he says ransom, there's two things we got to think about. The first one we just jump over, and that's this idea. We are in bondage. The second, he's coming to pay the price. Okay, we think we get that. But the first is we're in bondage. That's something like I want to answer and get it right, but it really is a tough thought to live out. We don't live out a thought like we're in bondage. Ben, we live, I may not be perfect, I may not believe exactly the way you believe, I may not do exactly the way you do it, but I'm free. I'm in control. Alex, I get to make decisions. I get to do what I want. That is not bondage. No one is more a prisoner than the one who doesn't know that he is a prisoner. Or, said this way, the one who doesn't know he is a prisoner is the most complete prisoner of all. Because, Brother Ivy, when we don't know that we're in bondage, we don't even want, we have no desire, no attempt, no try to be free. When we deceive ourselves and think we're in control, we are totally, completely captive. Bondage. Well, you're in bondage too. Well, I'll just throw out a couple things, because clock. Well, there are three things that for sure we are captive to. And they're bad masters, by the way. They're not kind. They're not nice. We're not house servants. We are under oppression. I'll give you three. First, we are in bondage to self. Timothy says we're lovers of self. That's not good self-esteem. That's we appoint self to be in the center of our life and how we view anything. And let me tell you, that creates a terrible bondage. How do you know if self is in the center? How do you know if you've appointed self to be the main thing? Well, it'll result in stuff like this. You'll feel like you're always wronged. You'll feel like you're always being hurt. You're always being mistreated. You're on the outside. You're never in the group. You're always the victim. You deserve more. You deserve better. It is how you feel because you're looking at self. You're comparing yourself with others. You are not looking at God. You're not trusting in Him. You're not depending on Him. It is self is in the middle, and you are always full of self-pity. Now, let me tell you, that's bondage. Because most of the time, there's a storm coming. You know what that is? That's stress and pressure. You know what self can do about that? Self can do nothing. Well, I'm going to board the house up, and I'm going to, great. Be prepared. You know what our 135-mile-an-hour winds are going to do to that? Well, it depends on how long they're sustained. Yep, which you control how? But Kevin, self-control is nothing. So when I need what self decides I have to have, I'm just going to be full of self-pity because it's not happening. I learn every day I don't have control. And that creates bondage. Second, and we've talked about this a number of times. I think we talked about it last week, so we won't do it much. But if Jesus is not our Lord, something else will be. That's the picture of idolatry. If Jesus is not the Lord, something else will be. What do you need to be happy? What do you need to be secure? What do you depend on? Okay, whatever those things are, if it's not God, it's idolatry. The picture is strong desire. We can have strong desire for good things. We talk about the idea of lust or strong desire. We usually make it bad, but you can have strong desire for hope or strong desire for security or strong desire for value. You know where that strong desire is supposed to be met? Our strong desire for value is met by our relationship with God. Our strong desire for hope is met by our relationship with God. When we attach that thing to something on this level, we have created an idol. We are now in bondage to that idol. Third, I do want to say this. I should have said this. I should have wrote this down, then I would have remembered. If we're living with self in the center, the great purpose of our life is going to be to protect self. That's going to make it impossible for us to be a leader, by the way. Nobody wants to follow that person. That's going to make it impossible for us to effectually be a good parent, for us to be a good employer, for us to be a good... Oh, we won't get here, so I'll say this. Doug, you know this is when notes are done, 5 pages left, 5 minutes left. You can't even live in a good society without these things. Society depends on respect one for another. If it's not respect one for another, then it must be fear, which means you got to do this to society. Do you know what happens historically if you do this to a society? It's a short period of time until there's a rebellion. Our society today is existing without respect, and you know what is being said quietly in the ears of young people? Our country just needs a good rebellion. You need a good rebellion every 250 years or so. It's scary. The Bible it's so perfect. It is the answer book. Third, the law. It is a bad taskmaster. You know what you mean when you talk about the law? Every person has some base idea of what the law is. We do. Okay, well, we're talking the 10 Commandments. No, 10 is too many for me to remember. Okay, let me just talk about 2. Love God with all your mind, with all your heart, with all your soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. Okay, because in this is all the law and the prophets. Okay, if we could pull that off, we pull off the 10. Brother Kevin, it's easy for me to remember too. Okay, so every person has some idea of this. That's how societies are built. You see, that's the picture of respect, one for the other person. Okay, if there's respect for the other person, there's not violence, there's not theft, there's not abuse. I'm not trying to swindle them. That's how things are built. So we have some base idea of the law, which society depends on. The problem is we don't like that picture. Why? Brother Kevin, think about it this way. Devastating exercise. I mean, do this, prepare to be devastated. And when you are, run to Jesus. But that's what this will do to you in your life. Look back on a day. Pick any full day. Look back on the day and ask yourself, did I meet the needs of other people with all the energy, with all the creativity, with all the joy, with all the speed that I would have met them if they were my needs? Okay, that's what we're talking about. Have I treated everyone the way I would want them to treat me in the same exact circumstance? Okay, the answer is no. The real question is, how often did I break it? And the answer to that is probably every hour. Now, Brother Ivy, that picture is what we're talking about in under the law. Okay, I know that. There is guilt and there is struggle and there is, because I know that about me. So, how do people deal with that? Again, some people find the most rigid, ruling, societal mess, like maybe one with over 700 rules. Because I can concentrate on all of those rules, and while I'm concentrating on all of the rules and the colors and the hair and the, I don't have to think about the main thing, which I'm failing every hour. Some people, that's what they want. They give me the most rigid, rule-based society. Others, and this is very popular outside of Christendom, we kind of come up with this, what's truth? And we start to take something that is very simple and confuse it. And in this confusion, we can justify all kinds of things. Because what's truth? We are in the result of that, because that started in the 70s in our country. We're now living in the result of that, being humped through our kids for 50 years. And there are others who are just so fatalistic that they just say, okay, I'm bad, I'm doomed, I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but it's all a mess, so I'm just going to live it up while I can, and then it'll be over. Under bondage. Jesus came to pay the price. It even tells us what that price was. That price is the cup. What is that cup? That cup is the wrath of God. All through the Old Testament, the cup represents the wrath of God. And Isaiah talks about the cup. What is the cup? You drank the cup. Now there's going to be desolation. There's going to be destruction. There's going to be famine. There's going to be the sword. You came to drink the cup that we might be free. Here's the clock. I'm going to do this. I got 1 minute. I got to talk fast. When you do that, Ray, what happens is, oh, you're talking about a God now full of wrath and judgment. And I just want to say, you cannot have a God of love without judgment. You can't. Brother Kevin, I'm going to make you a great artist. Okay? You're a great artist. You created your masterpiece of work. And then you have to sit right there and watch Ben over there just destroy it. You're in love with, this is your life's work. You love it. You know what's going to happen when you see it being destroyed? I don't know how you can have anything happen that doesn't have wrath. I'll make it more personal. You raise your son, and then you watch as sin comes in and destroys and takes apart and hurts. You know what's going to rise up? Wrath. God created the perfect world, and sin has come in and destroyed it, and that brings up wrath. And Jesus said, I will take that wrath. That's the cup I drink, that you might be free from bondage. And in response, man said, can I have the right or the left? That's where we're at. Ray, we close in a word of prayer.